Here is the most unsettling thought you will ever sit with. If something created everything, then what created that something? And if the answer is that nothing created it, that it has always existed, then why could the universe itself not have always existed? The moment you introduce a creator to explain existence, you have not resolved the mystery. You have simply shifted it one step back, and that single logical move unravels everything. Stay with this because it goes far deeper than you might expect. Let's begin somewhere familiar. You are a child, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, lying on the grass and gazing up at the night sky. The stars stretch endlessly above you. The darkness between them feels thick, almost tangible. And your young, unfiltered mind asks the question that every human being has asked since the very first one looked upward. Where did all of this come from? Your parents might have said a higher power made it. Your teacher might have pointed to the Big Bang. Your grandmother might have lit a candle and whispered something sacred. But notice something striking. Every single answer, regardless of culture, century, religion, or science, eventually collides with the same wall. But where did that come from? This is not a philosophical trick. This is not reasoning being deliberately difficult. This is the most honest question a human mind is capable of forming. Causality, the principle that everything has a cause, is the very foundation of how we interpret reality. Every time something occurs, something else produced it. A ball rolls because you kicked it. Rain falls because clouds gathered. Clouds gathered because water evaporated. Water evaporated because sunlight heated it. Cause, effect, all the way back. Most people, when they follow that chain far enough, experience a kind of mental vertigo. The mind reaches for solid ground and finds nothing beneath it. And in that moment of falling, many reach for the oldest answer in human history. There must be a first cause, something that initiated everything, something that exists outside the chain entirely, something eternal, all-powerful, and uncreated. They call it God. And that instinct is profoundly human. It is not foolish. It is not primitive. It comes from the same impulse that drives every scientist, every philosopher, and every curious child staring at the stars. The need to understand. The refusal to leave a mystery floating unanswered. But here's where we must slow down. Because the solution people have reached for, this idea of a divine, eternal, uncreated creator, when you press on it carefully, when you apply the same questions it was meant to answer, something very strange happens. It fractures. Here is the question few are willing to ask aloud. If a supreme being created the universe and has always existed, uncreated and eternal, needing no cause, then you've already accepted that something immensely complex, something conscious, something with will and intention and power can exist without a cause. But if you have accepted that, why apply it only to a creator? Why not apply that same reasoning to the universe itself? This is not a rhetorical device. This is a genuine logical demand. You cannot use the phrase "it always existed." It requires no cause as an explanation for a creator while simultaneously insisting the universe could not have always existed and must have had one. That is not reasoning. That is special pleading. It is accepting a rule for everything except the single thing you wish to exempt from it. And the problem deepens when you ask a second, less obvious question. What kind of entity is this creator exactly? Most theological traditions describe it as infinite, all-knowing, all-powerful, present everywhere, and existing entirely outside of time. Consider carefully what those descriptions actually mean. To be all-knowing is to contain, in some sense, all information. To be all-powerful is to be capable of every conceivable action. To exist outside of time is to be unbound by the very structure that gives cause and effect their meaning. These are not modest attributes. They are staggeringly complex ones. And here is what physics has steadily and quietly taught us over the past century. Complexity does not emerge from nothing. Order does not precede disorder. Consciousness, as every available piece of evidence suggests, arises from simpler physical processes. It does not generate them. So when someone claims that a creator has always existed, They're asking you to believe that the most complex, most ordered, most information-dense entity imaginable simply always was, with no process, no emergence, no origin. And they present this as an explanation. To be fair, let us examine the strongest version of the argument for a creator, because ideas deserve to be engaged at their best, not their weakest. Philosophers call it the cosmological argument. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And that cause, by definition, must be something that did not begin, something eternal, something beyond space and time. It is structured, it is logical, and it has persuaded some of the most formidable minds in history. The physics beneath it carries genuine weight. The universe, according to our most precise measurements, did have a beginning, or at least a boundary. Roughly 13.8 billion years ago, space itself was unimaginably dense and hot. Time, as we experience it, may not have existed before that moment in any meaningful sense. The equations of general relativity, when traced backward, approach a singularity, a point where the known laws of physics cease to produce meaningful predictions. There's a genuine scientific mystery here. The universe does appear to have a starting point, and the question of what caused that starting point remains unanswered by physics alone. That gap is real. Into that gap, theology steps and declares that the cause was a supreme creator. On the surface, this sounds almost reasonable. There is a mystery, and here is a proposed solution. But this is precisely where the surface explanation begins to crack. When scientists encounter a gap in knowledge, they treat it as an open question, a territory to investigate further, a signal demanding better tools and deeper thinking. What they do not do, and cannot do while remaining scientists, is fill that gap with an entity that is itself entirely unexplained and then declare the mystery resolved. Because substituting one mystery for a larger one is not an explanation. It is the appearance of one. The universe's origin is genuinely mysterious, and that is fully acknowledged. But exchanging one mystery for an infinitely more complex one, a conscious, all-powerful, eternal being, and presenting it as an answer is where the logic quietly collapses. Here is where the real turning point arrives, and it comes not from philosophy, but from mathematics and physics. In 2012, physicist Lawrence Krauss published work building on decades of quantum cosmology that demonstrated something astonishing. In quantum mechanics, nothing is not what we assume it to be. The classical notion of nothing, a pure void, an absolute absence of everything, turns out to be physically unstable. Quantum fields, even at their lowest possible energy state, fluctuate. They vibrate. They produce virtual particles that flicker in and out of existence. The vacuum of space is not empty. It is a restless sea of quantum activity. And crucially, quantum mechanics tells us that systems do not require a classical cause to transition from one state to another. At the quantum level, the very concept of cause begins to dissolve at the boundaries. But here is the deeper insight, the one that fundamentally reshapes how you see this entire debate. When we invoke a creator as an explanation, we are importing a very specific assumption, that the universe follows the logic of everyday causality. That things do not happen without reasons, without agents, without prior states. That assumption works elegantly at human scales. Billiard balls, falling objects, colliding stars. But when we reach the boundaries of the universe, the Planck scale, the quantum foam, the first fractions of the first second of existence, that logic breaks down. Not metaphorically, mathematically. The equations stop producing clean causal chains. Time itself becomes uncertain. The word before may lose all meaning entirely. So when someone asks what caused the Big Bang, they're smuggling in a causal framework that may simply not apply at that scale. They are asking a question that sounds grammatically valid, but may be physically meaningless. Like asking what lies north of the North Pole. The God hypothesis does not merely fail to answer the question. It assumes the question is coherent when physics strongly suggests it may not be. The universe may not require a cause, not because of philosophy, but because causality itself may be an emergent feature of the universe rather than a rule that governed its birth. Let us step away from the equations for a moment and sit with a thought experiment. Imagine standing at the edge of all existence. Not in space, because space is part of the universe. Not in time, because time is a dimension woven into the fabric of space-time, and we are imagining the moment before that fabric was woven. You are at the true boundary. Nothing behind you. The universe ahead of you, not yet born. Now ask yourself what is here. If you say a creator, then that creator is here, this eternal, conscious, all-powerful being existing in a timeless void. But your mind immediately strikes a wall. If there is no time, there is no sequence of events. If there is no sequence, there is no decision-making. If there is no decision-making, there is no intention. If there is no intention, there is no act of creation. A timeless being cannot decide to do anything, because deciding is a process. It has a before and an after. It requires time. So either the creator exists within time, in which case where did that time originate, or it exists outside of time, in which case it cannot act, cannot will, cannot create. The problem does not resolve itself. Now try the alternative. Imagine standing at that same edge and finding not a conscious being, but something closer to a quantum field. Something without personhood, without intention, without a plan. Something that simply exists in a state of pure potential. And from that potential, as quantum mechanics permits, a fluctuation occurs. Not caused, not intended, not designed. Simply possible, and therefore, across sufficient possibility space, inevitable. The universe does not require permission to begin. It does not need a creator to authorize its existence. In a reality governed by quantum probability, if something is permitted by the laws of physics, then across sufficient possibility space, it will occur. No mind required. No intention required. No first cause required in any theological sense. And here is the most vertiginous part of this thought experiment. You are composed of particles that emerge from that fluctuation. Your consciousness, your capacity to ask this question at this very moment, is the universe becoming aware of itself. Not through design, through physics. That is either the most beautiful accident in all of existence, or it is something for which we do not yet have adequate language. But it requires no author. Let us look at what physics actually reveals about the layers of reality, from the smallest scales to the largest, and examine what we find when we search for a creator signature. At the subatomic level, particles do not behave like tiny objects obeying clean, predictable rules. An electron does not occupy a definite position until it is measured. It exists in a superposition of states, a distributed probability across space. This is not a limitation of our instruments. This is the actual nature of the electron. The universe, at its most fundamental level, is probabilistic, not deterministic. This matters enormously, because if the universe at its roots operates probabilistically, if events can occur without strict prior causes, then the entire logical foundation of the creator argument begins to tremble. The argument states that everything which begins to exist has a cause. But quantum mechanics demonstrates that some things begin to exist without a cause in the classical sense. The argument was constructed for a Newtonian universe. We no longer inhabit one. Go one layer deeper, and you reach quantum field theory, the most precisely tested scientific framework in human history. Within this framework, particles are not fundamental objects. They are excitations of underlying fields. The electron is a ripple in the electron field. The photon is a ripple in the electromagnetic field. These fields permeate all of space. They are not constructed from anything smaller. They simply are. And in their ground state, their lowest conceivable energy, these fields still fluctuate. They're never truly at rest. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle forbids perfect stillness. Energy and time are intertwined in such a way that a perfectly quiet vacuum is mathematically impossible. Now extend your view to the largest scale. The observable universe contains roughly 2 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy holds hundreds of billions of stars. The numbers are so immense they cease to be imaginable and become purely mathematical. And every atom in every star in every galaxy is governed by the same quantum fields, the same physical constants, the same mathematical laws. Those laws are identical everywhere. The speed of light, the charge of an electron, the gravitational constant, these values do not vary from one region of the universe to another. They are perfectly uniform across 93 billion light-years. That uniformity does not point toward a personal, relational, prayer-receiving creator. It points toward something far more abstract, something closer to mathematics itself, possessing a form of existence. And mathematics carries no intentions. Now, take the widest possible view. Cosmologists have strong theoretical grounds to believe our universe may be just one among an enormous, possibly infinite, collection of universes. The multiverse is not science fiction. It emerges independently from several separate branches of physics. Inflationary cosmology, the landscape of string theory, and the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics all point separately toward the same unsettling possibility. If the multiverse is real, then the question of why this universe possesses the constants it does has a very different answer than a creator carefully calibrated them. The answer becomes that in an infinite array of universes, every possible combination of constants exists somewhere. We find ourselves in this particular one because this is the one that permits the existence of beings capable of posing the question. This is called the anthropic principle, and it is not circular reasoning. It is an observational filter. You cannot observe a universe that does not permit your existence. So any universe containing observers will naturally appear fine-tuned to accommodate them. No tuning necessary. Now zoom to the smallest possible scale. Go below atoms, below protons, down to the level where space itself becomes granular, the Planck scale, 10 to the power of negative 35 meters. At this scale, the very concepts of space and time may not exist in any continuous sense. Some theories of quantum gravity propose that space and time are emergent phenomena, that they arise from something more fundamental, the way temperature arises from the collective motion of particles. If space and time are emergent, then asking what happened before the universe is like asking what lies south of the South Pole. The question is not unanswerable. It is malformed. It assumes a structure that does not exist at that level. And here, positioned between the cosmic vastness of the multiverse and the quantum graininess of space-time itself, is where the creator hypothesis runs out of room. There is no remaining gap to occupy. Every opening that once sheltered the idea of divine intervention has either been filled by physics or reframed as a question that may not require a traditional answer. The universe does not resemble something that was constructed. It resembles something that simply is, deeply mathematically, inevitably, and that is far stranger and far more magnificent than any creation story has ever managed to convey. Here is the central insight, the one that brings everything into focus. The concept of a creator, specifically the personal creator of traditional theology, the intelligent designer who exists outside space and time and wills the universe into being, is not merely unsupported by evidence. It is, in a very precise sense, logically self-defeating. Any explanation worthy of a name must be simpler than the thing it explains. That is what explanation means. When Isaac Newton accounted for planetary motion with a single equation, he replaced complex observations with a simple underlying law. When Charles Darwin explained the diversity of life through natural selection, he replaced the assumption of a designer with a simpler and more powerful process. Sound explanations reduce complexity, but introducing a creator increases complexity enormously. You begin with a mystery, the existence of a universe. You introduce an explanation, an eternal, all-knowing, all-powerful conscious being. And now you have a new mystery that is orders of magnitude more complex than the original. Where did this being's consciousness originate? How does it process infinite information? How does it act without time? How does it exist without space? You have not resolved the problem of existence. You have multiplied it and concealed the second problem behind the word eternal. The philosopher David Hume observed this centuries ago. The physicist Victor Stenger spent a career formalizing it. The biologist Richard Dawkins framed it as the central argument. Any creator capable of designing the universe would need to be at least as complex as the universe itself, and would therefore require just as much explanation. An unexplained explainer is not an explanation. This is not a hostile observation. It is not an assault on belief or on the deeply human need for meaning. It is simply the demand that we apply our reasoning consistently, that we hold every proposed explanation, including the most ancient and comforting ones, to the same standard. The universe is astonishing. Its existence is mysterious. Its laws are breathtaking in their elegance. But the appropriate response to a mystery is not to conjure a larger mystery and declare the matter settled. The appropriate response is wonder and continued inquiry. Before we reach conclusion, let us sit with something important. Because this conversation is not only about logic. It is about what it means to be a conscious creature in a vast, mathematically governed, and apparently indifferent universe. There's a particular kind of solitude in the universe that physics describes. A universe with no author, no blueprint, no cosmic purpose inscribed in its equations. A universe in which you are a temporary arrangement of atoms that will one day dissolve back into the void from which they emerged. That is a difficult thing to hold. And perhaps that is precisely why the creator hypothesis has endured across every culture in every century. Not because it is logically airtight, but because it is emotionally necessary. It renders the solitude bearable. It gives suffering a framework. It offers the terrifying impermanence of life a narrative within which it carries meaning. These are not trivial things. These are the forces that hold civilizations together. But here is what philosophy has quietly maintained for centuries and what science now states openly. You can have the wonder without the fiction. You can have the awe without the author. You can stand beneath the night sky and feel the full weight of existence. Not diminished because it is purposeless, but amplified because it is real. A sunset is not less beautiful for being explained by the scattering of light. A human life is not less meaningful for being undesigned. Love is not less genuine for having emerged from neurons rather than divine decree. The universe does not need to have been created in order to be extraordinary. It simply needs to be. And when you truly absorb that, when you allow the reality of it to settle fully, you recognize something remarkable. The universe, in producing you, produced something capable of understanding it. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. That is not a small thing. Even in a universe where miracles do not exist. Every atom in your body was forged inside a star. The carbon in your cells, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, every single one of those atoms was produced through stellar fusion across billions of years and scattered through space when those stars exploded. You are, in the most literal sense possible, assembled from the remnants of dead stars. And those stars were made of hydrogen. And that hydrogen was produced in the first 3 minutes after the beginning of the universe, when energy density was so extreme that protons fused spontaneously in an expanding fireball. And that fireball emerged from what? A quantum fluctuation, a probabilistic event at the boundary of time, something without intention, without awareness, without design. And from that almost nothing, through 13.8 billion years of physics, came hydrogen, then stars, then heavier elements, then planets, then chemistry, then life, then neurons, then language, then the very question you're sitting with right now. Where did all of this come from? The universe produced you, and then, through you, it began asking about itself. You are not separate from the universe, observing it from the outside. You are the universe folded back upon itself, achieving self-awareness for a brief and astonishing moment. The cosmos examining its own reflection in the mirror of a human mind. There is no creator in the equations, no signature in the constants, no author in the margins. But there is something, something vast and intricate and almost incomprehensibly beautiful. A mathematical structure of such depth and elegance that entire human lifetimes are insufficient to explore its outer edges. Call it whatever you wish, but do not diminish it by making it simple. Do not replace the genuine, dizzying, magnificent mystery of existence with a single convenient word. Sit with the mystery. It is the most honest thing you can do.